Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Mental Health Gaming Podcast. As usual, I am Brad and I'm joined once again by Stu. I can't actually think of a pithy thing to introduce him, so Stu, how you doing?
Not too bad. I've not had the greatest of weeks. Everything is starting to ramp up and feel a little bit tense again. I don't know whether it's just me or whether that's a wider thing, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, no, we'll touch on it a bit later, but as we spoke pre-show, that there's definitely a switch in atmosphere out and about at the moment. But thankfully, we haven't always got to be out and about, and we can be indoors and we can talk about games. I'm going to go as usual and ask you what you've been playing, but I might interrupt depending on what your first selection is. So off you go, Stu, as usual.
So I will talk about it very briefly and then we'll have a general convo on it, because I've been playing Supergiant's Hades and it's basically fantastic. It's universally liked, it seems. It's got great review scores and people like it.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased for Supergiant because they released Bastion, if people remember that one, and
they should.
I thought, yes, well, I mean, we can debate that, but I thought it was a fairly average game. I'd sort of give it 6 out of 10, but it did really, really well. It made them a lot of money, and then they released Transistor, which I thought was a far superior game as a second game and as a second release, and that didn't do anywhere near as well. And then they released Pyre, which, as in funeral pyre, because with my accent it might sound really weird, and that didn't seem to do anything either. So I was starting to get a bit disheartened for them on their behalf, because they're releasing great games and not seeming to do as well as they deserved. But now Hades seems to be knocking everyone on their ass, which is fantastic. So I think this is the first time we've played the same game during a week that is out on release, and that we didn't arrange to play together, and that we both love. So over to you and your impressions.
Yeah, so slight disagreement with you on their back catalogue. Bastion for me changed everything. It was the game that made me stand up and take note of indies more than any other. Just everything about the production quality of that game and the gameplay loop and everything, it just drew me in, and I absolutely loved it. And you're right, it wasn't perfect, but for what is essentially a debut game, oh boy, that is set in some levels. Transistor, yeah, you are 100% correct. It's superior in every way, and it's criminal that did not get the recognition it deserved commercially. Critically, absolutely loved. Commercially, didn't get what it deserved. And Pyre, again, I suppose I'm guilty of this. Absolutely loved what I've played of it, but I haven't played enough of it. I think it came out at a time where there was just saturation. And it was very difficult to stick with one game. And I think it was unfortunate because Pyre is absolutely brilliant. And Hades, I've seen certain places call it the greatest indie game of all time. And before going into specifics, I heard that and almost scoffed a little bit. I was like, really? The greatest indie game of all time? I mean, there's a high bar there. And then I thought about it, and I thought about my time with it so far, and I can't argue against that. As someone who loves indies, there's no way I can argue against Hades being the greatest indie game of all time, and it's a culmination of Supergiant's work over the years that's led to this, and I can't argue against that. As someone who loves indies, there's no way I can argue against Hades being the greatest indie game of all time, and it's a culmination of Supergiant's work over the years that's led to this, and they deserve every bit of success they get, purely because if you look at the games, you look at Bastion, Transistor, Pyre before that, now into Hades, they're a Supergiant game, and you look at all of them and you can see they're a Supergiant game.
Yeah.
Yet I'm not talking like, do you know when you see an Ubisoft game and you know it's an Ubisoft game because it's a collectathon and it's an open world, or Sony's first party, a third person adventure epics and stuff like that. I don't mean you can see a Supergiant game like that, but there's just something about a Supergiant game. You look at it, every single game has different mechanics. They're not actually linked in any way, but they feel part of the same family somehow, yet they're also different. And it's just how they've pulled this off, I don't know, but Hades is, oh my word, amazing.
So totally agree with everything you said. And it's hard to pick out, well, not hard, but it's difficult. Yeah, it is a little bit difficult to pick out why it's so good. And I would personally say, I think it's probably because they've got that roguelike balance right. And, you know, I was just about giving up on them entirely because they were, you know, in all honesty, they were really starting to piss me off because it was starting to feel like...
I'm assuming you're talking about roguelikes there and not Super
Yeah, sorry, yeah, roguelikes in general. Yeah, as a bandwagon. It was far too bandwagony for me, and it started to seem like a complete excuse to not design levels. So it would literally be like... when you get a board game and the tiles that you get in a board game, and they're really good and the artwork's nice, but it's literally just, you know, 12 tiles and you can infinitely shift them around as much as you like. It's not going to make them any different. It's just going to configure them differently. And there's tons of roguelites that are completely guilty of that. But this is not one of them. And I think the reason is because the variety in the art style helps, the variety in the enemies helps, but also the quality of the action and the speed of the action turns it into far more of an arcade game, which I always bang the drum for, than you know, both their previous stuff and roguelites in general.
Yeah, when I look back at roguelites, I'm a big fan of roguelite games anyway on the whole. But I can name a few that really stand out and have stood the test of time. So Dead Cells, I think, is one that will do it, but does have frustrations about it. And Binding of Isaac is just an absolute pinnacle of roguelikes, possibly now surpassed by Hades. But yeah, roguelikes, there's been so many other games that have tried to get in on it that haven't understood what made those roguelikes so damn good, that they are just a copy and paste of an idea onto, as you said, onto almost tile sets, without doing much about it. But yeah, I'm with you. There's something about the design of Hades that is just absolutely spectacular in both the visual and the gameplay loop, and also the writing. I didn't realise, again, if you look at Spelunky and you look at Binding of Isaac, they've got a certain lore about them that is interesting, but they don't bring it into the world building like Hades does. It's got a full-blown story written into the gameplay loop. Doesn't matter how you do, that story progresses, but how you do dictates how that story progresses or what parts of the story you get, and it's all coherent. And I can't get my head around how they've managed to pull that off. It's just superb.
It is. It really is. Yeah. It's as though, you know, it's quite, and I wouldn't say easy, but if you're writing a large RPG, then you've got like your major narrative beats, and they're going to be hit when you hit certain milestones. But they've done it in such a way with Hades that it's got a ton of content, but it's written succinctly. And one of my things is I hate overwritten games where, you know, there's tons and tons of dialogue that's pointless. Each conversation tends to last like 3 exchanges, like 3 paragraphs, which is, you know, admirable restraint. And they also seem to be able to track nicely where you are in that conversation, so that it feels coherent with that character that you're interacting with, but also with the other characters when you go off. So it's not like, oh yeah, we've fought loads and loads of times, and then you go off to somebody else and go, oh, I've never met you before, let me introduce you to the underworld. You know what I mean? So yeah, the way they've balanced it is fantastic. And
the characters themselves are just superb. I mean, to be honest with you, to try and explain it, if anyone's not from the UK, they might struggle to get some of the nuances that are in there. But there's something about the way they're written that no character is... It's weird to say because it's set in like hell and everything, but no character is inherently bad. There's like the angst that is in there. Is just done just right. Father and son dynamics work really well. Having a son who's who's becoming a teenager myself, I'm watching the interaction there, and I'm going, yeah, I see that. That's definitely there. And then I don't know if it's because I've lived up north for a bit as well, but there's something about Achilles that comes across as someone northern. It's just in the way he is and how supportive he is of your character, that there's just something, I don't know, sort of like Yorkshire to Northwest based about him. Just the praise he gives and the constructive criticism he gives, and he's for me, I don't know how other people feel about it, but he's my favourite character in the entire game. There's just something about the way he is in that game that I just absolutely love.
Yeah, they are excellent, and I think there's a really strong Northern European influence in it, which is kind of odd. You know, it's not something you expect to see. And Supergiant aren't a UK developer, are they?
No.
And yeah, it's just a fantastic game. I mean, we could probably wax its car for another half hour, but it's definitely one of the games of the year already.
Yeah. One last thing I do want to say about it at this time, because it won't be the last time we speak about it over the coming weeks. I'm sure. Accessibility options in Hades. Bravo, Supergiant Games. They've created their game that go, look, this is how it should be played, and this is how we want you to go through it. But we're not going to gate any content should you struggle. God mode, I've not used it myself, but I've seen the explanation of it, and brilliant. You start off with a damage reduction limit, and every time you fail, you take less damage on the next run, so you can get through it. But there's also a super hard hell mode as well. Should you find the main story that you've done it and you want another challenge, you can do that. And again, you don't have to earn any of this. It's all there from the outset, and I am all for games giving you accessibility options. And I don't just mean for disabilities and things like that. For all levels of ability for playing games, giving those there from the outset. So again, that needs praising, because absolutely brilliant to do that.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, no, similar to you, I haven't really gone into those options, but I love the fact that they're there. They're really, desperately needed, and it kind of contrasts strongly with the other sort of fighting supernatural creatures game I've been playing, which is going to tie into our other conversation, which is Ultimate Ghouls and Ghosts. Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins, which I was talking about last week. So I completed that, and it's fantastic, but it's fantastic with a huge asterisk on the end, which is, you can't play it on PSP. Because on PSP, it's pretty much garbage, and that's because of the form factor, the technical limitations, and the difficulty. And it's a huge sort of round of applause and tick in the box for emulation, because you can set it to 60 frames per second, which is really important, especially in Twitch games. You can set it to high resolutions, so you can actually see what's going on, and you can use different controllers, which is important because the PSP is not good for precise controls, to put it mildly. And you can use save states, which are absolutely vital, because it's such a ridiculously over difficult game. And not just hard in a, I died because it's difficult, fair enough, but you died unfairly because things respawn off screen and hit you through floors. That kind of unfair. So I don't mind attempting a level, and if I die because I was crap or I wasn't fast enough, fair enough. But I'm not going to accept I'm standing there dodging one thing and then something that I could never have reacted to kills me. So it fixes that problem, by cheating, but it fixes it, and it doesn't make the game particularly any easier either. It just means that you don't have to.
It's a single player game. Do what you want.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's.
Yeah. It's adding your own accessibility to it. Yeah. And that's fantastic, and that is kind of one of the reasons why emulation is so important as well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's It's going to allow me to play games that I otherwise miss and can't play anymore, or games I used to love playing and can't play anymore. And emulation is absolutely great for that. And one of the things that I struggle with, though, is the morality of how far do you take emulation? How far back do you go? And what reasoning should you give for using emulation? So, for your example there with Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins, is an absolutely spot on one. You know, the PSP version, it's on the PSP, but it's not the best to play on that particular system. You've bought the game, you own the game, so you find another way to play it to get the best out of it. And that, I think, is an absolute great way to do it. And by no means do I advocate emulation to say, let's play, I don't know, Breath of the Wild without buying it or something like that, because that's straight up piracy. But yeah, it's going with stuff like that. My moral quandary at the moment comes to a game that will be coming out soon that I've owned and I want to play again, but I do not want to reward the company behind it. So it's Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I've had that on the 360, completed it, and I've got a yearning to play that again. I don't have a 360 anymore. It's not backwards compatible, never will be, and technically the only way now to play it on a new system will be to give Ubisoft money. That's not happening. I'm not giving Ubisoft money at the moment. So I'm looking at it going, well, I own the game. Is it wrong to actually just get a 360 emulator and play Scott Pilgrim emulated on the PC, the version that I owned? And when you struggle with your mental health in certain ways, I've lost hours. Instead of going to play another game, I've gone in my head and battled myself in my head over where I stand morally over should I download and play this game or should I not. Another example being Blur. I can't play Blur again unless I emulate it or I get a cracked version or anything like that. And it's such a grey area that the arguments for and against it in different ways, it's like everyone goes into it like it's black and white, and it's that messes me up more than a lot of things. So where do you find yourself standing on emulation, and at what point do you go, yep, this is fine, and you go, no, actually no, look, that's where I draw the line? Is there a specific mark for you, or is it on a case by case basis?
Yeah, I've thought about it for so many years that I have my own set of ethics around it now, and they would probably sound sort of complicated to somebody who had never dipped into it before, but it's actually comparatively easy for me in that basically if I've bought the game before and playing it on something else doesn't cause any harm or reduction in whatever income or whatever from anybody, then that's absolutely 100% fine. So a good example, other than obviously Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins, Resident Evil Remake.
Yeah.
So I bought Resident Evil Remake on the GameCube, and then years and years and years later, they brought out a remaster of it on PCs and consoles, and I was like, oh yeah, I fancy playing that again. But because I fancied playing it again, I wasn't going to go and buy it again. I could have, because it was remastered, but I was like, well, I've paid and bought it, and I just want to play that again. So I just stuck that on an emulator and played it. And it's like,
yeah.
So I'm not taking anything from Capcom or their publishers, or any distributors, and I've already paid for that IP, and I'm playing the same type of thing again. The fact that I downloaded it as a ROM off the internet makes no difference, because I already, I've paid for it. So that's fine for me. I absolutely wouldn't pirate a game. So Hades is out on the Switch, I think. I've got it on PC.
Yep.
But I would never
I've got it on Switch.
Yeah. So I would never download that and play it. I just wouldn't do it. But I would download it, pay for it, download it, and then fire up a Switch emulator on my PC and try playing it and see what it did. because I've paid for the game, I've paid for the IP, they've got my money. If I then choose to try it out on a different system that again doesn't use any of their hosting capabilities or take any money away from them, I feel I'm perfectly entitled to do that. So it's there's some grey areas, but it's broadly, for me, it feels much more black and white, because I feel as though they try and make it grey for older games and ROMs just so that they can make you pay twice for the same product, which of course is exemplified in the new Mario bundle. So
I'm not gonna go all Jon Snow interviewing Matt Hancock on you. But I'm going to put a couple of questions to you anyway.
Please do.
I'm hoping it doesn't sound like him interrogating you, and you don't need to scare him off like a dirty politician. But use your example, Resident Evil Revelations, was it, did you say?
Just the remake. Yeah, the remake.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Resident Evil remake, sorry, yeah. Okay, which is fine. And then you spoke about that if you bought a game on the Switch and if you wanted to play it on something else, you'd use a Switch emulator.
Yeah.
Now, to use Supergiant as an example, I own Bastion and Transistor on pretty much every system they've had except PC. So I've bought it on PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, Vita. I think I've probably 4 or 5 times I've bought that game, but because of the timings of it, I've never owned either of them on PC. Now, I've just bought them again on Steam using the credit I've got because they're on sale, and I like to have them all in one place, and that's probably where I will get PC Hades at some point, is on Steam. So, where would you stand on that? Because I want to play them on PC, but I own them 5 times over already, having paid money for them. Where's your what would you say there is, should I be buying it on PC, or would I be within my rights to go, actually, instead of doing that, I'll just get an emulated PS Vita version and play that on PC instead? But because it's still readily available, should I be buying it because I want to play it on PC? I'm not playing it on PC because it's the only way to still play that game despite owning it elsewhere. I can still play that on other systems, but I want to play it on PC. So I've made the decision to purchase it. But then to take it to another degree, Droplets was available on PC, but I can't play that. So I would need to pirate that to be able to play it. So does it matter if the game is accessible still on that platform? Does how many times you've purchased that game matter? Or is there something else that you reckon that comes into it?
Yeah, all of those things do matter, and that's where some of the difficulties come in. What I would normally do is, so I don't normally bother. So Hades is a great example. So I would buy that on the best platform available to me. So I bought it on PC. I normally only stick stuff in an emulator that's currently available if it's an exclusive to a platform. So I want to play that game, but the platform is not ideal for it. So a great example of that, and unfortunately something that didn't work properly for me, was Astral Chain. So on the Switch it runs at 30 frames per second. So I bought it and I was happy with it, but I was like, yeah, I would be happy with this at 60. That really is where this needs to be for a fighting game. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll fire it up on my PC because I've paid for it and it's not available on PC. Unfortunately, it's not emulated properly and it doesn't work properly at all. But it was because it was only available on one platform that wasn't ideal. I was happy to try it on something else. If I bought the Astral Chain, the version of Astral Chain on Switch, and a PC version came out, I would more than happily just double dip and buy it on the PC. Yeah. For Droplets, I would you've bought it once. It's not available anywhere. Just get it. Just get it. You're not hurting anybody or taking money from them by playing it.
Unfortunately, no one cares enough about that game to have it available anywhere, even to pirate. So trust me, I've been trying for the best part of the last half decade. I'm about the only person that actually cares about that game.
Yeah, but Scott Pilgrim. So the new version coming out, are they just republishing that under their wing?
I believe it's a remaster.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know. But again, that just brings up a whole new morality background that you need to wrestle with, I think, because I say, do I want to reward Ubisoft for a game I really want to play?
Yeah.
I'd rather PayPal the developers personally, and go, look, there's that. By the way, I'm just going to go and pirate your game now because I don't want Ubisoft to have more money because they're a scummy company who don't deserve anything. Quite
right.
Which again, I think is probably why I'm so big towards indies, because if it turns out the developers of like the Supergiant games were massive arseholes, then I could just easily just go, well, you're just not getting any more money. I'm directly punishing you because you're a small indie company. But it just does get so much more complicated with the bigger companies. And I think that also adds into the mix the idea of piracy, because you pirate or you emulate. We'll say pirate. No, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. If I was to pirate Art of Rally, that is taking a sale directly out of a developer's pocket, because it's a very, very small team have made it, and it takes directly from them. And those individual sales make a difference. A company like Activision, Ubisoft, EA, a game I might not have played anyway and stuff like that, does it make a difference? This is where I suppose honesty stakes comes into it. When I was younger, I pirated games because it was cool. I'm on about like in my early teenage years and stuff like that, where someone would come round and went, "Oi, fella, got a few moody PS1 games. Do you want some?" So I'm like, well, yeah, of course I do. How do I do it? Blue tack in the PlayStation. Yep. And yeah, in terms of pirating, I've done it before where I've pirated games. I've played it, enjoyed it, but actually, do you know what? Now I'm going to buy it. And I don't think I used to really worry, but as I got older, I used to worry about it, the effect it would have on different companies. And it was only like I'm thinking about preparing for this episode that I really got thinking about it. And yeah, I do prepare sometimes.
Do you?
And looked at yeah, definitely.
Just kidding.
And I looked at like Game Pass and stuff like that, and went, essentially that's the same as what I used to do when I used to pick up a game on the Moody from someone to play it, decide I liked it, and then bought that game. I get a game on Game Pass, or let's say Humble Bundle, or I suppose to a degree it doesn't really count. Well, I suppose it does, because it's got their Vault and stuff like that. Or any of these services where games come and go. I play it, and if I like it and it's not available there, I buy it later, because it is it's a way of trying out the games more than anything, stuff you wouldn't usually want to try. And so it's an interesting one, piracy. I don't think piracy is always like the negative thing that it's always thrown up to be. There are always going to be those that will, you look at Brazil and stuff like that, and it's like they've given up trying to even combat it in those areas. But then at the same time, I got the chance to play a game like Thrill Kill on the PlayStation 1 through piracy. And I'm absolutely glad I did, because, boy, that game was crap. And I'd have been gutted. Well, you couldn't buy it anyway because it was banned. But it had such an aura about it that when I then played it, I was like, oh, is that it? It's not even that bad in terms of like why it was banned. The game's bad. Maybe it was banned because it's a bad game, and that's a good reason to ban games.
Oh, they should do.
But yeah, it's a really weird one. And because of the way my brain works, it's the sort of thing that I battle with for weeks and months on end. It's really, really dumb. I wish I could just go, I'm just going to pirate this game because I fancy it, or I'm just going to emulate this game because I fancy it, not have personal internal debates over the whole thing. But it's always been that grey area. Whatever you say, whatever your stance is with emulation, piracy, or whatever, there will always be someone who can argue, and I think reasonably, into why you're wrong, whatever your stance is. Because one of the arguments, if you turn around and go, piracy and emulation's wrong, you should blah, 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 it's so very, very wrong. But then game preservation. It's, being able to get hold of games that you never was able to before via, like archive.org, except for droplets, because apparently no one cares about droplets. But it's they preserve games, and I think it's absolutely brilliant that that's out there to do that. But then you can also get modern games on there that shouldn't be on there quite yet, and yeah, that's wrong. So there's always that argument one way or another, and it's an interesting debate that will rage on and on.
It will. I think it's far less of a debate these days, and I think that's because, like, the when the PlayStation came out, which is I think probably still the most pirated console. The game.
Oh, that's got to be the DS.
Oh
surely.
yeah, it could be the DS. Yeah, but yeah, one or the other. The games.
Even my nan had an R4 card.
Yeah. But yeah, no. When those consoles were in their pomp, the games never really dropped in price. They were only really hard copies. There wasn't really any digital distribution for the DS, and the games never dropped in price because it was a very closed market. They did drop, but I remember, like, you'd wait for a platinum release for stuff, and that was still £30, and this is £30 like 25 years ago. You know what I mean?
That's about £6 million.
Yeah,
money,
with inflation.
Like
yeah, so it was crazy money, and I think when they found a way, to get around it, that was it. Everyone was doing it. I think nowadays with sales and the fact that if something is full price for its first 2 weeks, and then it's going to have 10% off, and then you can knock 10% off that every at least 3 months, say for 5 years, until it's like 50p.
Yeah.
So the boundary between piracy and emulation is more clear than it ever was, I think, because games come out, if you pirate them, you've got very little excuse, because it's going to get cheap down the line, it's going to stay available online for you, and it's going to end up costing nothing. So, but there are these real edge cases, like you said, Droplets, and like a few others knocking about, like Ultimate Ghouls and Ghosts. I keep calling it that. Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins, where there are several factors that stop it being, anything that you could just buy. I would say, to end off, what my point would be, if there's anyone out there worried about doing it, now obviously, technically it's illegal. Downloading a ROM off the internet is illegal. But for me, that's just, that's insane. That's just craziness to have that blanket thing. I would say if the game is not available to buy anywhere, then you've, especially if you've bought it before, but not limited to if you've bought it before, then you can download it, because it's not available anywhere to pay for. So get it. And then if it comes up in the future, somebody goes, oh, here we are, I'm going to republish this, then support them and give them the money. Unless it's Ubisoft, and that's another problem, because Star Wars Squadrons is coming out, and I don't really want to give EA my money. But if I buy a second-hand copy, so they don't get it, I'm forced to then play it either on the Xbox or on the PS4, and I want to play it on my PC for VR and for the HOTAS that you gave me, all that stuff. So. Yeah, I mean, but I'm not going to break the law to do it, unfortunately, because I've got morals about it. But yeah,
no. So, just my points on that to a degree. This is what's interesting, and this is where we're getting the changing face of video games. Always, there's the arguments of you need physical because it's game preservation, and I get that, because they can't take that away from you. However, if a game only ever came out as a hard copy on a PlayStation 1, and every PlayStation 1 in the world dies, you can't play that game anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
That's dead. That game, your physical copy of that game is dead. Now, I know that's an extreme case, and that's unlikely to happen in our lifetimes, and someone's going to have a preserved version somewhere, but the longer time goes, the harder it's going to be to play that physical copy anymore. Now, digitally, yes, they can revoke those licenses, but the second a game is out on anywhere where internet is possible, you can get hold of that game again in some fashion, apart from Droplets. And you're right as well, sales. I've got some credit on my Steam account, and because I'm on a Supergiant love fest at the moment, I picked up Giga Chess, which isn't Supergiant, Train, which again isn't them, but I also picked up Transistor, Pyre, and Bastion. and I paid a grand total of £13 for 3 of the best indie games ever released and a couple that I fancy taking a chance on. £13. And sales like that, which weren't possible in years gone by, unless it was a complete fire sale for a trash game, are the reasons why I think digital is a good thing at times, and why there's a less of a need to pirate modern video games. And emulation, I don't see it being a thing of the past, but as we see more things like, maybe not Antstream as such, but more services like that, more streaming services, I honestly think we'll see less and less need to actually go out and download an emulator game, because it will be available in some fashion, as long as they don't get greedy and make it that it's actually easier and cheaper to go and pirate.
Yes, no, I agree. People very often only pirate when they don't have the availability and don't have the immediate access. Yeah.
Same with TV.
Yeah.
Netflix, everything. I can't remember the last time I actually went and pirated a TV series, which used to be, everyone was doing that a decade ago, because it was, oh, this thing's out in America, when's it coming out here? We've got to wait 3 months. Well, I'm just going to go and stream it instead.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
People just want accessibility for things. We spoke last week, the weekend a little bit, and then prior to this about both of us having not the best of weekends with external factors. And one of the things you mentioned was you was having quite affecting dreams, and they was vivid, and I think like almost knocked you for 6 a little bit.
Yeah.
And it did get me to wondering, with obviously external factors always have an effect on what your brain's doing during, like, while you're asleep, but I do wonder how mental health has an effect on that as well. What does mental health do? Because I've noticed since I have been on my medication that my dreams are just all over the shop, so vivid, so varied, where I've woken up in a cold sweat before, not through being scared, just woken up in a cold sweat because of the intensity of the dream, the weirdness of the dream as well, was maybe wake up and just go, what? I've had these really vivid ones that the second I woke up, I've gone, wow, that was intense. What was that dream actually about? I don't remember anything about the dream. All I remember was an intense dream and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, sort of like, I know sort of like there's entire tons of research into sort of what dreams actually are, and why they happen, and why we dream, and what the effects are. I've noticed a lot of people talking about it this year, that they're having these weirder dreams because of the shit show that is 2020. So have you found it, like, is it something that's only just started with you, or is it something you've always had happen, sort of like really vivid dreams?
Yeah, it's only started recently, and more so, I mean, I've had times in the past where I've had them, and some of them have been, good. Dreams don't tend to be good, because they tend to be your brain working out the problems that you've had and trying to find solutions for you in your subconscious, or they seem to be. But, I had average, normal dreams and stuff like that, and very rarely have nightmares. But at the moment, it's very, very vivid, unpleasant dreams, and I wouldn't call them nightmares, because they're not kind of like monsters, and I don't wake up like sweating and terrified and stuff like that, but they're just really, really depressing, and really it's such a massive downer, because they're reflecting just everyday stuff, but everyday stuff now feels like world ending kind of. It isn't, but it kind of feels that way, and it's my brain saying, well, yeah, okay, it's not the literal end of the world, but it's the end of your world. It's the end of the way that the world has been, and it's never going to be the same again. And that's absolutely true. And they're the sorts of dreams I can't really remember from the time, but when you go through a period of grief, you have very strange dreams. Very often, for me, they were sheltering me from reality, and then you wake up and the reality was worse than the dream. But they were marking a point of your world changing and your brain chemistry changing and you never being the same again. And it seems to be like that with this. So I will wake up from these dreams and my whole day will be ruined, because the things that you go, oh, okay, well, okay, so this COVID outbreak has happened in this place, and I heard a snippet about this species on the verge of extinction, and this, that, and the other, and you kind of downplay some and deal with others, but your brain doesn't do that, and it deals with them all at once, and then it's kind of like, I can't avoid all this horrible stuff at the moment, and then that's it. The day's literally been poisoned for me. I feel like I'm walking around poisoned when that happens.
Yeah, no, it's really weird on sort of like, again, it seems to be actual events and the effect they have. I'm not going to go into a long drawn out here's what this dream was, but I mean, I've spoke about before where I'm identified now pretty much as non-binary, and I remember going sort of like to bed and having a dream where I had a dream. I dreamt about Hansel and Gretel, almost like a Tim Burton Cross Geiger style fever dream of Hansel and Gretel, where I was both Hansel and Gretel in the dream, and I was being shoveled into an oven by a giant witch-looking thing. That was basically shoving me in, telling me I'll never be accepted, you'll never be accepted, and it was just loads of different faces in this witch. It was just this really vivid dream, and I woke up and I remembered this dream. It's one of the rare occasions that I remembered the dream, and I was like, what the was that? What on earth was that I've just dreamed about? And then sort of like a little later in the day I was thinking about it and went, bloody hell, that's come off the back of me talking about actually admitting that I'm non-binary, actually understanding where I actually stand in all of this now. Not being able to know what I was when I was a child, and not understanding that I was never like masculine, never overly feminine, so I'll never fit in. And along with my ADHD and my weirdness in inverted commas, and then sort of going, actually, I've never been afraid to say like, this guy's attractive or this person's attractive, or I'm in a heterosexual, like a loving heterosexual relationship, or as my partner puts, what do you mean loving? But we're in a loving heterosexual relationship, but I just so happen to be comfortable that I can be attracted to anyone. And so I think just like looking at that my dream was me sort of trying to deal with public perception of what people see as gender and sex now, and what that is. And it's just like, again, I think that was because of the meds I'm on as well at the moment, because they seem to be almost hallucinogenic in terms of what they do to you while you sleep. And I think you're right. It's like you said, like when you dream, it's your brain is trying to find solutions to what's happening in your life. So they're never sort of like dreams aren't designed to make sense, because it's your subconscious trying to work things out. But I remember that one just really sticking out as just terms like this, almost like the imagery within this dream just being so freaky. And they're the sort of dreams I'm having about all kinds of different things at the moment. And I think it's 2020.
Yeah.
And a mix of my mental health and the meds I'm on. And it's just so weird.
Yeah, there's not been a time in our lifetime that has made us turn inwards so much. Because not only have we mentally had to turn inwards, obviously, because so much is changing, but we are literally physically turning inwards and staying indoors more often and doing more things indoors and at times forced to be indoors, not against our will, but as part of a social cooperative kind of action. And
most of us.
Yeah. Yeah, most of us. Yeah. But so it's changed the way that we behave. And even if ostensibly nothing that you do has changed in yourself, everyone around you, or lots of people around you, have. So that changes you. So yeah, it's a very insular time, a very interior time, where you're trying to work things out. And that, even if it's going to end up positive, things have to be knocked down to be replaced. And at the moment, I feel like stuff's getting knocked down internally.
Yeah.
Like the walls that made up me are kind of being knocked down, and it's time for new ones to be put up, kind of thing. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think you're talking about, obviously, they are sort of like everyone on the whole being sort of having to look at themselves, look at the wider world, deal with themselves a lot more. They've actually got to deal with personal issues head on, because they can't. Used to be able to escape things, personal issues, by going out to work or going out with your mates, if you had any, and doing certain activities to try and hide what you was going through. You can't do that as much now, so you're having to deal with these things head on. And again, I wonder if we're collectively now dealing with a lot of stuff. There's a reason why Black Lives Matter movement is gaining such ground and traction, why people are not putting up with Trump's bullshit anymore, why people are actually rising against governments, the discussion around transgenderism, people like J.K. Rowling are not getting away with comments that, do you know what, I think even a year ago they might have got away with.
Yeah.
And all things like that. And I remember looking at it and seeing a discussion I had, like, my son came home from school and was talking about something to do with Harry Potter and transgenderism and stuff like that, because it had been mentioned at the school. And someone had mentioned about, do you know the hypothetical bearded rapist that's going to pretend to be a woman so they can go into the toilets and rape women? That guy that's always hanging around. And that's something J.K. Rowling believes. And I remember some people go, it's got to be true, or not true, but there's got to be elements to that, because it's in her, it's her new book is about someone who dresses becomes a woman so that they can get access to certain people so they can kill them, blah, blah, blah. Bearing in mind that J.K. Rowling also wrote books about wizards and fantastical lands that don't exist. So, don't hold her up as a bastion of what might actually be possible. No. Okay, here's an outlier. One person might think that they can pretend to live as a woman for a certain amount of time to get the gender identification certificates if they need to go and use the women's toilets. Because again, I don't care if you if I go into a woman's toilet and I've got a 3-month grown beard, even as someone who considers themselves non-binary, I'm not going to be accepted in that woman's toilet, and people are going to raise eyebrows. To be able to be accepted to go into that woman's toilet, I'm going to need to go through a few different physical changes and prove mentally that that's where I am and stuff like that. If I was doing that just because I wanted to rape or hurt somebody, I'm not going into that level of detail. I'm not going into that. So this hypothetical person does not exist. But these discussions are needing to be had. And again, seeing them now, because you're more exposed to all of this, because not just because of the social media, but because we're all seeing more social media, because we've got more time on our hands. I think that's how I've been having dreams about that kind of thing. And it's all there. It's all sort of like the only time you're stopping now is when you go to sleep. And that's when your brain is just trying to unpack everything, and everything that's being thrown at your brain at the moment, both on a personal level and a wider level, is just so fucked up at the moment. And that, I think, explains why you're seeing more and more people have more vivid and disturbing dreams.
Yeah, definitely. The rate of change in society is so fast at the moment, because, as I say,
it's unprecedented.
Yeah, it is, because it's all turned inward. So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's an interesting one, for sure. But I think the final point I want to make on all of this, and I think it draws it all together really, really well, and I think people will really get me with this one. Let's bring back droplets.
It's the only way, mate. It's the only way.
Honestly, it's what's going to save 2021. Get droplets remade before 2021 and everything will be fine.
Yeah, well, you'll be happy anyway.
Yeah, well, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, obviously a slight joke at the end there. I would love droplets back, but not at the expense of anything else, obviously.
No.
But yeah, have you got any more you want to say on the matter, or are we done, would you say?
Yeah, I don't think there's much more that can be said about them. It's an unfortunate thing. It's one of those things that tries to, in me at least, tries to make me have a better day. Like, I will try and do things to make sure I have a better day. But it does make, on some days, it makes it very difficult. But yeah, I'll keep trying, and luckily not knocked back by it too hard each time. Yeah. So that's a positive to leave it on, I suppose.
Yeah, and the one positive I think that has changed in all of this, and one message that has started to get through, is the message of it's okay to not be okay. That when someone asks how you are, you can go, yeah, I'm a bit shit actually.
Yeah.
And you haven't got to go, oh, okay, how do we deal with this? As we did, I think, yesterday when we exchanged pleasantries and, you know, what's on the docket for this week. It's like, oh, it's a bit shit. Yeah, it's been a bit shit here. Doesn't need a massive in-depth discussion about why things are shit, but it was kind enough to know that I'm just going to admit that it's not been a great day, or it's not going to be a great, you know, I've had a bit of a shitty weekend. We're seeing more and more people be able to admit that, and I think that's one of the positives that's definitely coming out from everything. That, you know, when you ask how someone is, you don't want to hear, yeah, it's all right, which is usually code for, yeah, you don't even want to know.
Yeah, definitely.
And I want to see more people just, if you turn around to me and go, yeah, it's a bit shit, I can turn around to you and go, was it something you want to talk about? And it's like, no, I just felt like saying, you know, it's not been the greatest weekends. This has happened, and, you know, I'll deal with it and move forward. Because that sometimes is enough. But you also know that the person's aware that if something else changes, if they're not quick to react to something, or something else getting them down, and they've made it aware it's not out of the blue. You know that something's been getting to them in some way, and that you can never tread on eggshells with it, but you can at least go, okay, well, if you need a couple of days, or you need a day, or whatever, then that's fine. Or if you want to power through, that's fine. I'm aware of it. And I think mental health at the moment, it's looking like everyone's struggling more and more and more, which they are. But I honestly think we're going to come out of the other side of this with a better appreciation, or better understanding even, of what we need to do as a community, a wider community, to help each other through things, and not just go cheer up.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't know where that last bit came from, because that was nothing to do with the dream section, but there you go.
It works. We'll go with it.
Yeah. It's like I film with my Jerry Springer Final Thoughts. I filmed them, record them all, and they go, we'll just plop that in somewhere. That'll do.
Yeah. And you're a little bit more credible than Jerry Springer. Or are you? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, so thanks for joining us again. It's whatever we can do to sort of like help you through. Our Discord is available. You can reach us on Twitter. The podcast is obviously up for free wherever you listen to podcasts. We do an after hours special, which is pop culture based stuff, and you can get access to that via our all access tier on Patreon. You can even get this podcast early and unedited via our early access tier on Patreon. So check that out. But yeah, though, just to reiterate to everyone, thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for continuing to be on this journey with us. Reach out wherever you need to, or just continue to enjoy the content. Been joined by Stu again. Thank you, Stu. I've been Bradley. Everyone buy droplets. Goodbye.